Beautiful. I'm so glad y'all are here. I'm so excited that we just turn it down a little bit. There we go. There we go. I'm so happy that Dan Bolin is here today. Dan is a very beloved new friend of Diversionary, and he has an amazing story to tell. And beyond that, and I'm going to let him tell that story a little more. And he tells it in this beautiful book, The Courage to Be Courageous. And beyond that, he also has a podcast of the same name where he offers other people, mostly people in the LGBTQ community, but people who have a story to tell. And so he is all about telling stories and offering folks the platform to tell their stories, and so we wanted to give him the space to do that here today. He's also graciously offered to donate all these books to Diversionary. So all the proceeds from these books will support Diversionary, which is the nation's third oldest LGBTQ theater here in San Diego. An amazing place, an amazing man, an amazing storyteller. We're so grateful for you. Why don't you come on up and tell us your story?
Thank you. Well, thank you, Jesse. I appreciate that very much. I'd like to thank the Diversionary Theater for allowing me to come and tell a little bit about my story and about my book, The Courage to Be Courageous, and how it kind of came into being. It's a pretty powerful story, and Dennis has read the book. We're going to have a comment from him toward the end of the podcast. And those of you who have read it have found it to be pretty inspiring, and some people have found it to be very riveting. And I want to thank everybody for the reviews on Amazon. It's got 5-star ratings. Also on my podcast, danbolin.com is my website. You can go there and listen to all the podcasts. I just finished my 31st, I think, and I'm doing 2 more next week. I use a theater a podcast studio out of Scottsdale, Arizona, that has different places out in the United States. They have it's called Populi, which is a hard one to say. It took me a long time to figure out how to say that. So anyway, I use them, and here I Zoom from my La Jolla condo here. And then we're also going to live theater when I get back to Scottsdale, because the sound is a little better there as well too. So anyone that has a story to tell, and it's always fearful to tell your story, and I get that. All of us have fear in our life, but we also have courage. And one of the things that's very important is to be able to embrace the fear and get courage to go through it. Because what happens when you don't embrace your fear and run from your fear, usually you'll end up addicting to something. In my case, it was workaholism and religious addiction, because I hated who I was. And so that's one of the things that you'll learn on my podcast. We've done some incredible podcasts. I was telling Dennis, we just did one with Gabe Matheson, who was in conversion therapy for 20 years. And he trained under the inventor of conversion therapy out of Los Angeles. And after 20 years, he realized the damage that he had done. And so it's an incredible podcast. And then we also have Juan Curran, who was actually a patient of conversion therapy that went through electric shock. So there's some really powerful podcasts on my website. So if any of you have a story to tell, you'll have my card. You can contact me through email. You can contact me also on my website. And we all need a voice, because without a voice, we're silent. And when we're silent, nothing gets done. So this is my voice. My voice is my podcast, and my voice is my book, my memoir. And I think I mentioned this before to those, if you're familiar with my podcast and familiar with my book, the memoir, all the proceeds of my book go to support 3 LGBTQ organizations. Outright International, just fighting for gay rights worldwide. Also the Trevor Project, which many are familiar with, for teens and young adults that are suicidal. Powerful organization. And the SAGE organization. All 3 of those organizations, all the proceeds in my book go 100% to those 3 organizations. I have no desire to make money off my book. It's the voice I want out there. It's the voice for our community. And without a voice, like I said, we're silent. We cannot be silent. So that's kind of where my voice is heading that way. I have no plans to discontinue my podcasts. Although I'm up in the senior part of my life, I'm going to continue to have a voice, and my voice will be through my podcast and through my memoir. So check them out, pass it on to other people. Once you finish reading the book, pass it on to someone else. And also use your voice, and how you can do that is being able to go on Amazon and give a voice to the ratings. The ratings have been 5-star. Also go on the podcast. If you see a certain podcast you really like, you can write a comment and you can say how much that's affected your life. What's fascinating, a gift that I never thought I would get, is the fact that at least half of the people on my Amazon account that get comments are heterosexual. They're not just LGBTQ, they're heterosexual. And what's fascinating is because they've all had fear. And fear has caused many of them to bury who they are. And we had one individual, for example, that came out as he's a heterosexual woman, very well known in real estate, and she was able to realize when she read my memoir and contacted me, she said, I've been unhappy in my marriage for 20 years. I've done everything everybody wants. I've kowtowed to my husband, and I've been miserable. And so that made a difference in her life. So it just doesn't appeal to the LGBTQ community. I think it appeals to humanity. Anybody that's having fear in their life needs courage to be able to get through your fear. And I think that's why that's very important as well. So check that on the website. So I want to just tell you a little bit about how this story came to be. And I want to thank you for having me at the Diversionary Theater to do a book signing. Thank you, Tom, for promoting it on the frontliners as well, too. We appreciate that as well. And so one of the things that I want people to understand a little bit about is, you already told about where all the proceeds go to support Diversionary Theater. But let me tell you a little bit about my story, just as a synopsis of it. I came out as gay at 70. Not 7. 7-0. I know I don't look that, but I always tell John I'm 7:39 and holding. But anyway, I came out at 70, and the reason I came out at such a late age is because I had to deal with who I was. I was a workaholic. At my worst, I was working 90 hours a week, not only running my own executive search firm, but also traveling the world and giving seminars for other recruiters. And so anytime I would have these feelings, I just worked harder. I mean, 90 hours a week. I loved what I did, and we were #1 in the United States for we were to rotating machinery as was our category. We were #1 in the United States for what we did. But anytime I have these feelings, I just work harder, okay? And then I use religious addiction. Let me give you a little history there. I was raised in a very abusive family. I was second of 7 children. And my father was physically abusive to all of us kids, but me particularly because I was the emotional kid. I knew at 7 I was different. I didn't know what different meant, but I knew I just liked wrestling with the little neighborhood boys. And I just liked it. I didn't know anything about sex, didn't know anything about gender identity or anything. I just knew that I was different. Well, I was raised in a generation that you could not come out as gay. In my mind, that's what I was thinking. But most people would agree with that. In fact, it was the American Psychiatric Association that did not declared it as a mental illness before 1975. Well, who in the hell wants to come out and say that they're mentally ill? So there's where my shame started, through the environment of where I was raised in the generation. There were no role models for gay people. It was something that you were all screwed up and you were mentally ill. So as I got older, I began to realize I'm ashamed of who I am. Not only ashamed, I hated who I was. I hated who I was. So what did I do? Became an overachiever, become number one in the recruiting industry, valedictorian, senior ball king, president of the student body, you name it, I did it all. Because I had no self-esteem, so other people gave me the esteem that I needed because I hated who I was. Now, that's where the story kind of gets going, actually, in my memoir. And then you're going to see it's very riveting, it's very powerful. You're going to see some vulnerability that my family has never seen because they will not have anything to do with me. When I came out as gay at 70 years old, I was married, second marriage, and I didn't have anything to addict to as far as workaholism anymore. I sold my company, very successful company, sold it to someone's like a son to me, really. And I had to deal with who I was. So I had to work through the shame. And for the first time, I couldn't go addicted into a job because I sold my business. So I got active in the religious part even more. And that's where I finally realized, listen, I know you don't like who you are, but you're going to have to do some work around your shame here. Because shame will eat the core of who you are. It eats you up. There's a difference between guilt and shame for me. You can be guilty for something you did, but shame is who you are as a person. And when you're inauthentic about who you are, you cannot pass on authenticity to someone when you're inauthentic. Make sense? Mm-hmm. Because, in fact, you'll see a podcast I did with Andy Vaughn there, and he made the same comment. He said, you know, if you are not if you're not authentic with who you are with yourself, what you pass on to others is inauthentic. You cannot pass on authenticness until you get authentic with yourself. So there started me getting into a psychologist, Chris Coyle, who identified in the book. And I had to take a look at this, and I had to look at who I was. And I had to unravel all the shame that I had about myself. And once I was able to unravel the shame and begin to realize through several years of processing, I'm a beautiful gay man. That's who I am. And what I learned from that, nobody defines who I am except me. Religion does not define who I am. Organization does not define who I am. My job does not define who I am. My partner John does not define who I am. I define who I am. I define myself as a loving, giving, gay person. Not perfect, but I know what I am. And whether John and I have a great relationship, you'll read about it in the book, how we met. But if something happened to our relationship, I would get grief. Of course I'd grieve. But he doesn't define me. He just completes me. So that's a nice thing to think about, you know. You define who you are. So I'm going to read something here. When I came out as gay, I'm going to read the prologue to this book because I think it gives you a little insight and kind of leaves you kind of hopefully intrigued a little bit to read the memoir. And this is the prologue that I wrote in the book here as well. And by the way, I used a professional writer, Landon Napoleon, who was actually a professional writer. In fact, one of his books became a Hollywood movie called Zigzag. I got connected with him because my therapist, Chris Coyle, said, God, Dan, have you ever thought about writing a memoir? You have such a powerful story. Now, when your therapist says you have a powerful story, who sees everything, okay, that's kind of an insight to maybe take a look at that. So which I did. But I did that with the idea of Catholicism because when I got this fellowship from the Church of Jehovah's Witnesses, and by the way, I served there for a long time as an elder in the church, doing international, regional conventions, speaking, you know, to audiences. But I began to realize that I had to be able to write this as a cathartic reason, because when you're one of Jehovah's Witnesses and you're disfellowshipped in the church, the shunning starts. Nobody can talk to you. All my friends were Jehovah's Witnesses because you couldn't have friends outside of the organization because they were considered worldly. Okay, so all my friends, I lost all my friends, I lost all my family, my brothers and sisters. My daughter, who totally supports me, who's not a Jehovah's Witness anymore, totally supports your dad and very supportive of John and me and our relationship. But it's a hard place to be. But I knew when I came out, the worst thing that would happen was lose all my family, which I know I would. And I did. So that's a little unraveling. But I had a sense of peace and a sense of happiness that I never had in my whole life. And I think that's what's so important. When you really and begin to love you for who you are as your authentic self, then you give that peace and happiness to other people as well. And that's kind of where this story kind of ends up. But there's going to be lots of bounces and ups and downs in the story. Some of it's pretty unraveling. You're going to learn more about me than my own family knows about me. Because they don't want to know the authentic, they call me Danny. They don't want to know the authentic Danny. They want to be able to hang on to the Danny that was inauthentic. Because it's too painful for them to look at, to see who I am. So that's where this book starts. I'm going to read the prologue here, and I'll give you a little insight. It said when you're 73 and you land in Cleveland, USA, two things are going to happen. First, you're going to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And then the next day, you're coming here for the third time to the renowned Cleveland Clinic, where the cardiologist tells you, go ahead and live your life as you have been, but, quote, don't lift anything over 30 pounds. But figure that in 1 year, you're going to need open heart surgery. With that kind of news, I'd rather be back in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame admiring Prince. Prince, as you know, was Roger Nelson, who, by the way, is a Jehovah's Witness, said you can always tell when the groove is working or not. End of quote. Well, the groove is not working in my heart. He said I have a bicuspid valve instead of a tricuspid valve. At this writing in 2021, my aorta is expanding, and that valve with 2 flaps instead of 3 is leaking. Like I said, I'd rather be blissfully immersed back at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Prince, who was a Jehovah's Witness, also said, religion is good except when it starts interfering with the rights of other people. Looking back at my life, I would have to agree. I was both religious and negatively affected by that same religion. This trip unfolds at the tail end of the global COVID-19 pandemic. At the Hyatt Regency Arcade was eerily vacant on my arrival on May 15. Then off to see Prince the next day. And now here today. Before seeing the cardiologist, they drew my blood for testing, administered echocardiogram and MRI. The surgery to repair my aorta and replace the valve requires 10 days of post-op in the hospital, and, God willing, full recovery in 6 weeks. Back to that valve replacement, they would either be a bovine valve, a pig valve, or a titanium valve, which means I would potentially either move, oink, or clank. The potential for open heart surgery makes you ponder life. Seriously, life and death and everything in between, including the career you chose and the things you sacrificed along the way. Important things that went by the wayside time after time. Quote, don't lift anything over 30 pounds. Well, that's not really living life, because even in my 70s, I'm in the gym 6 days a week. I guess it runs in the family. Not the Jack LaLanne lifestyle, but rather heart disease. Both of my parents died from heart issues. My younger brother Dean died at age 59 in Mexico after a heart attack and stroke. My older brother Lee suffered several serious strokes and had open heart surgery. My sister Sue had a stroke, including my sister Marie. 5 of the 7 children have holes in our hearts. And yet the doctors tell us that it's not hereditary. Tomorrow I go home to Arizona to live a life that I have been, except without lifting anything over 30 pounds. But that limitation will not stick, because I am a workout animal. To add to my anxiety, the surgeon says there's a 40% possibility that I may not need surgery at all in 10 years. I prefer to live in the 40%. With the surgeon's support and keep lifting weights 6 days a week. Along with my 1 hour avocado each day. I'm addicted. I'm probably addicted to exercise. The medical confusion leaves me feeling like so many others in the heat of 2 different diagnoses. Frustrated, out of control, vulnerable. That kind of vulnerability has ways of opening doors inside you. Exit 1. When you use dysfunction to run your life, there's always a payoff. And boy, did I dysfunction my way through this lifetime. Prince also said sometimes it takes years for a person to become an overnight success. My overall financial success took a half a century. Even though I made my first million when I was in my early 30s, I'm not saying that to impress anyone. I was never driven by money, but a love for what I did. I love people. I'm motivated by helping people. With those traits catapulted me to the top of my profession. There was a downside too, though, which is I have the, quote, disease to please. That's my default. I mention the money because in my trust, I've already earmarked some of money for Cleveland Clinic to continue to support the important work they do to change people's lives, including pioneering medical breakthroughs such as the first face, when I was going over this, I said first face
plant.
Face plant. It's not a face plant. Transplant. John corrected me. I said, did I say face plant? It's not a face plant. It's a face transplant. Okay. But he's kind of cute, isn't it? And my possible coronary surgery. I piled up all the external markers: house, wife, family, church leadership, and a lifestyle. But I only begun finding my true success at age 70. A deeper and more important success rooted in transparency and honesty, which finally led me to total peace. It's never too late, except now the mortality clock is clicking. A bit more loudly with a potential major heart surgery looming. Money is great, no doubt, but now I realize I don't want to die with any secrets, including all the old family stuff I've been covering up all these years. I was fearful, hidden, and voiceless for 7 decades. Now I want my voice to be heard. I'm actually excited by the specter of truth-telling because vulnerability also can bring peace. For the record, I'm equally terrified by the vulnerability this process engenders. Welcome to my world, a lifetime going on with twin tracks of high energy and dark terror. So that gives you a little insight of what you're going to do. So, and that's the reason I wrote the book, is to have a voice. Because I didn't have a voice, as I said, for over 7 decades. And that's why I wanted to be able to be as vulnerable as I can. It doesn't always put me in the book in the best light. If they're not mistakes, some of them are going to be kind of horrifying for you. Okay? But it's vulnerable. It's who I am. And when I decided that I was writing the book, I did not want to go public with it. My co-author, Landon Napoleon, who we were a year and a half writing it, sometimes 6 hours a day. In fact, he flew into La Jolla to spend a whole week with me there, writing this book. And he said, you don't want to go public. You just want to write it for yourself, for cathartic reasons, and then you want to send a copy to all your family members, which I said, yes, I want each to have it. They can tear it up, they can rip it, they can burn it, or they can read it. Okay? I have no control. I will never know whether they read it, burn it, or whatever, because they don't talk to me. That's part of the shunning process of Jehovah's Witnesses. But after a while, I began to realize, and he suggested going public, and I thought, okay, let me think about it. I have a voice. I'm not just a voice to my family, I'm a voice to our community. So I went out in August of 2022, so I released it on Amazon, and I finally realized I had a voice, and I had a powerful voice. And then what ended up happening, and I started seeing that people were responding in a favorable way, about 8 months ago, I decided to do a podcast because I pay to have my website designed. I also pay to the studio that produces. I'm doing 4 podcasts a month. I've hired a studio to do that. And so what that means is then we're going to have a voice. So from going to not wanting to go public, deciding to go public, my voice is getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And my voice is your voice, okay? And you need to have a voice because let me tell you, some of our rights are being nibbled away at right now, as you know. You know, we have same-sex marriage free in this country. It's not a guarantee. It's just what we have today. It can change like that. Okay, so that's what I mean by having a voice. It's important to be able to have a voice for our community. And put your voice with my voice, and we'll make a louder voice. Okay? And I think that's very important for us to be able to do. How can you have a voice? Go to my website. Give it a rating on Amazon. Tell what the book has changed your life, what it's meant to you. Go to my podcast, check out my websites. If there's one that really touches you, you're not going to necessarily get 100% out of every one, but I believe you'll always bring a tidbit from each one of them that you're saying, yeah, that impressed me. Rather than say it impresses you, write that it impresses you. You know, words are powerful. Words are powerful. And we have to have a voice. We have to have a voice. So I'd like to leave you with that thought as well. I want to mention one thing too. I want to read something about the last part.
We're about to have an intermission.
We're about to have an intermission.
Yeah. So I think we should sit down and sign some books.
Okay, can I just read 2 paragraphs?
And that'll give folks a chance to do that.
I'll read 2 paragraphs. Well, not my relationship, separate.
No, you can read it after this. You can read the 2 paragraphs after intermission.
That sounds good. Okay, well, would anybody like me to sign a book?
Yeah, come up. We're gonna sell some books. We're gonna sign some books. Hopefully, the folks who are coming down from intermission get to meet you and get some books, and then we're gonna come back on stage.
And that sounds great. That sounds great. While we're getting me down there, I'm going to read 1 paragraph, and then I'm all done.
Great.
And this is the last part of my book. It says, from that my relationship suffered. I wasn't always available for my first wife and daughter when they each needed me in different ways. I wasn't motivated to make money, but rather a love and a genuine love of people. And that's what finally got me here after 70 years of searching this wonderful new place of peace and acceptance. And here's the last paragraph. Love. A new commandment I give you, that you should love one another as I have loved you, that you would love one another. And that's the words of Jesus. It says, and to that I would add, love yourself, be yourself, always lead with acceptance and love. That is where you'll find all you need. And there comes home to where you really are. However long and winding your route may be your authentic self. That's the end.
Books are $15. All proceeds support Diversionary.
Dan, you can sit back there. Dan, Rose.
Thank you.
I just followed the podcast too. We're gonna start this.
Oh, it's fantastic. Yeah, there's an incredible story about that. An incredible story. It's Steve, right?
Stephen.
E-H-E-N.
Yeah.